Hello everyone, my name is Cristobal Garcia. Thank you for clicking on my video signature assignment for the course EDU 6520 Learning in the Brain, Translating Research into Practice. In this video, I will present some of the research that has been done on the topic of emotional intelligence. So, in education, often the core goal of many assessments is to examine the content knowledge that students hold in a particular topic. Students memorize facts and are able to present this information in academic assessments. These assessments, to an extent, are used as measurements of student cognitive ability to reason and apply logic to the content that they learned in a course. While these assessments are important, emotional intelligence is something that has slowly started to gain attention as something that should also be explored. The aspect of emotional intelligence relates to the actual emotional development and ethical judgment that a person has. The issue that comes from this research is that much of the human emotion is subjective to the individual experience and belief. So the question rises is that how can emotional intelligence be assessed to present quantifiable results? To answer this question, more of a collaborative effort needs to be made to set a standard that researchers can guide themselves with when studying this specific topic. This also ensures that there is a possibility of replicating the procedures and getting similar results in future research projects. Part of the reason why emotional intelligence has begun to gather more attention over the last few decades is due to the emergence of new technology that allows researchers to view the brain activity and processes as people experience certain emotions towards specific stimuli. One risk that often comes when dealing with emotion research is that often the data that is collected from this line of work will sometimes be misinterpreted due to the misunderstanding of people that read the work or the results. This was the case when it came to emotions and learning. There was a misinterpretation of data by education literature and popular media that resulted in many educators believing that students could only be educated by their learning specialty, be it auditory or kinesthetic. The risk that comes with trying to measure parts of emotional intelligence is that there is not an established standard that everyone can adhere to. To some degree, there is a challenge between established research as to whether their measuring tool is being utilized correctly or at least gathering the intended data. Take the example of research that is conducted on imagery performance and visual ability. In the 70s, two similar research projects focused on these two factors as they related to learning. However, it was noted in an article released by the British Journal of Psychology that these two studies covered a similar field, but the results and understanding pretty much became very different. This was not to say that they were wrong in their approach. Rather, it pointed out that when it comes to research, it is important to make clear what the objective of the study is and ensure that the tools used for measurement are accurate. The reason why it is important to apply this concept to the way that emotional intelligence is studied is because there is a large overlap with a general understanding of what cognitive intelligence is. Humans have a tendency to make decisions that seem illogical at times and justify it by explaining that it felt like the right thing to do. One example of the influence that emotions have in decision making is the Iowa gambling task. In this task, participants rely more on non-conscious knowledge to make a decision, meaning that as they proceed with a task, they are at times making decisions on a whim or what might to them seem like a whim. This physical feeling bears no reason on the conscious mind, but is influenced by the emotion of the participant that has developed a subconscious memory towards positive and negative outcomes. This finding is further supported by participants that had brain damage that affected known areas responsible for emotion. When given the same task, they did not have feelings towards any specific action, so in the Iowa gambling task that requires participants to move quickly, these participants struggled to achieve any positive results. For this reason, to better understand cognitive intelligence, it must be just as important to recognize the value and meaning of emotional intelligence. That way, the two subjects can be better understood and also find the relationship that they actually have when it comes to decision making. To find this standard of measurement, my study relied on literary research to try to find the most accurate form of measurement of emotional intelligence. In the past decade, several research studies have been conducted to try to gauge the level of emotional intelligence that individual people have. These studies range from general public surveys given in popular magazines to more formal academic research conducted by colleges and universities. The first obstacle to overcome when it came to selecting the articles for this literary review was selecting a base definition that would be applicable to multiple subject areas, meaning that the article selected had a similar definition to what emotional intelligence is. The second challenge came in identifying an effective measurement process. Most of the articles that were collected in the Northeastern University Library and Google Scholar databases each had a different version as to how they measured emotional intelligence. Since emotions rely on introspection, most of the articles selected for this literary review target the observable behavior and decisions made by their participants as a form of measurement. They then compare it to the ranking or category system that is used to assess the raw data of the study. The last criteria for selecting the articles for this review stemmed from their awareness of other studies that researched the same topic and either expanded or challenged it with their own work. With the aforementioned search parameters, several articles came out regarding the definition, research, and implications of emotional intelligence. Before emotional intelligence branched into its own topic of study, much of its attributes were connected to personality. In the earlier formation of psychological studies, much of the research focused on behavior as a process that involved an input and resulted in an output. Psychologists like Pavlov noticed that some behaviors are eventually conditioned habits that individuals develop due to prolonged exposure to a specific stimuli. The issue with some of these studies was that it did not take into account the human experience of emotion. In the study, How Personality Related to Intelligence Test Performance, Implications for a Theory of Intelligence, Aging Research, and Personality Assessment, the researcher David L. Robinson was able to note that there was a correlation between test performance and individual personalities. In his study, he administered personality tests to see to what degree people were introverts and extroverts, how they felt about specific tasks regarding visuals and overall temperament. The results of this study revealed that depending on how the participants felt on a particular day of the assessment, along with their general personality, there were differences in test results. This led Robinson to assert that introverts and extroverts perform differently on tasks that cater to their personality strengths or weaknesses, which, to many researchers, this is their emotional capabilities. Seeing this change leads to more focus being placed on the implications that emotion has on the overall academic performance of students. Researchers Derek Dowda and Stephen D. Hart wrote the article Assessing Emotional Intelligence, Reliability, and Validity on the VAR on Emotional Quotient Inventory in University Students. This article presented a firm stance on emotional intelligence, defining it as a type of intelligence that emphasizes the emotional, personal, and social contributions to the more widely known cognitive intelligent behavior. The main challenge that this research provided was that it questioned the effectiveness of the emotional quotient inventory scales. The importance of this inventory is that it categorizes the emotions that people have and categorizes their ability to control them through a set of subscales. The keyword of this measurement formula is the amount of control that people have over their emotions. Dowda and Hart graded the emotional quotient inventory results on the uniformity of the results, omission rate, inconsistency, extreme item endorsement, and overall positive and negative impression management. Despite this challenge against the emotional quotient inventory scales, it still stands as one of the main tools used for measuring emotional intelligence. Sean Newsome, Arla Day, and Victor Cantano from the Department of Psychology at St. Mary's University challenged the idea that emotional intelligence has an impact on academic achievement, yet they still referenced the scales that were used in the other studies. In this study, they pointed out that the emotional quotient inventory measures non-cognitive capabilities, the competencies and skills that are meant to help people with their ability to cope with social and emotional pressures. The study ended up supporting the scales at the end because it measured observable traits, which did not rely on excessive introspection by the participants, further adding to the validity of the scales themselves. Before conscious effort to analyze emotional intelligence, much of the information known about a person's ability to recognize and manage their emotion was assessed through personal introspection, then relaying that information to a psychologist. The articles found for my literary review were each presented a unique way of conducting and interpreting their results, but the common thread was that they were all trying to find a way to accurately measure emotional intelligence. As it was mentioned earlier, emotions are something that can be subjective to the individual experience that each person has. Like anything else that is put under observation for research, there needs to be a variable that can be counted, measured, or recreated in a controlled environment. Planning out the research process involves identifying the goal of the project and working from that point to develop a procedure that will yield the desired results. In this instance, the goal is to learn how to best assess emotional intelligence, which at this time it directs to the emotional quotient inventory. This assessment ranks multiple subsets of emotional control that people can be consciously aware of, which is a concern in the sense that it seems to then delve in the area of cognitive intelligence that deals with conscious decision making. Newsom and his team used the four-tiered framework of emotional intelligence for their study. The ability to perceive, appraise, and express emotion is at the lowest level, with the second level reflecting the ability to use emotions to facilitate cognition. The ability to understand and analyze emotions constitutes the third level, and the ability to regulate emotions to facilitate emotional and cognitive growth reflects the most complex level of emotional intelligence, meaning that in this particular framework there is actually a ranking system in order to see to what degree people have control over their emotions. While the focus was placed on emotions, the words that stand out from the framework all connect to conscious control. With this in mind, it seems that intelligence is ultimately measured by the awareness that people have of their own self, and from this, the amount of restrictions that they can have on the biological functions that impair their ability to work effectively in society. Looking forward into the future, the research that was conducted for this literature review focused on the emotional quotient inventory and whether or not it was an effective tool for the use of measuring emotional intelligence. At this time, this does appear to be the most comprehensive tool for an accurate measurement. To take another step forward, another form of research could be conducted on the brain itself. The same way that higher order cognitive functions related to formal thinking were related to the frontal lobe of the brain, the same research practice is applicable towards emotion management. The flaw with introspection is that it still relies on human perception and belief, which can cause an issue to collect accurate data. The use of brain scans, on the other hand, are more accurate in the sense that they provide a clear image of something that is visible. They can give levels of brain activity, and more important still is the ability to pinpoint where specific functions related to emotions occur. In this case, what should be looked into is the reaction that people have when it comes to experiencing moments of empathy, which, unlike emotions such as fear or joy, is actually something directed towards an external factor, something that is happening to someone else other than themselves. To some extent, this type of research tactic would also add to the validity of studies that came before it. One of the articles in the literature review pointed out that one of the greatest weaknesses to emotional intelligence research is that researchers are divided in terms of how emotions can be assessed. Placing the entire focus on the brain itself will ground further research into one area, which is trying to draw connections between emotional intelligence to a biological construct. This will also provide a medium that can support additional research into a more measurable environment. Given the large use of emotional intelligence in the lives of people on a regular basis, it seems critical to understand it in depth. Every decision appears to be made on a whim, like something as simple as eating a cheeseburger actually has a logical foundation. Experience, emotions, and general formal thinking leave an imprint in the formation of emotional intelligence, and being aware of this can help people maintain more control over their actions. Looking at how frequently people rely on unconscious habits to operate effectively, the need to measure their ability to manage emotions in a manner that is conducive towards developing productive habits is only possible with continued research. In time, given how much overlap there exists between emotion and cognitive intelligence, it can be reasoned that there is the possibility that schools and other educational organizations will incorporate emotional intelligence as one of their key areas of research to improve their practice of student learning. On that note, the links to my references are listed on this final slide, and thank you again for checking in on my signature assignment.